Sadly, addiction is claiming lives every week in New Bedford. We all know it. We all see it. You can see the obits. It's there. It doesn't go away. Throes of drugs are familiar to people in New Bedford. Crime, broken families, homelessness, and yes, even death. It's a sad, sad story, and it's really one that this community and many others have lived with for a long, long time, sadly. There are people in New Bedford on the front lines every day battling the epidemic of addiction, counseling the addict, reaching out to the homeless, putting them on a path to sobriety and hope. Jamie Casey is one of these people. He works as the Adult Services Director and Operations Manager at Paaca, Positive Action Against Chemical Addiction. And he's here today to talk about his work on the streets. Jamie, it's good to have you here.
Great to be here, Jim. Thanks.
All right. It would seem to me that this would be very frustrating work because a lot of these folks relapse. They go back. They step back into addiction or, drugs or booze, and it's just hard to pull them out.
Sure. Yeah, extremely hard. Yeah. I think that's the nature of the beast, and really it's something that you know going into this. And I know we had talked prior, and you'd said that going through this makes you a lot more effective and capable when you've been through it yourself. So I think that it's a lot easier to be patient with someone when people have been patient with you, you know.
You've seen it. You've seen that work, and you've lived this. You lived this.
Sure.
And you're a younger man. You had issues.
Oh yeah. I'm going into my 10th year of recovery.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a pretty ugly battle for almost 20 years, and I like most addicts who've battled for any length of time. I tried everything. I went in and out of different detoxes and inpatient, outpatient facilities, tried multiple counselors, psychiatrists, medications, and failed miserably until I got it. Again, I'm not one who really buys into the rock bottom theory. I think it's more of a perspective or a state of mind when someone gets to the point where they're just willing or they're ready. And the hope is that in this line of work is that we can actually help people kind of nudge them into that place a little sooner before something tragic happens.
And I'm sure you've seen some tragedy. I know despite these management titles that you have here, I know you've gone hunting for instance, the homeless in the woods with the police perhaps. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to get these folks to come in because, as you say, they may not be ready.
Right.
They may not have the mindset to say, hey, I'm tired of this.
Right. I think, the opportunity, so as one of my other hats that I wear, and it sort of is relative to my position at Paaca, is I work as a chaplain with the Interchurch Council with Reverend David Lima, and we go out with the police officers and Seven Hills workers usually. And, we try to find, first we follow up with all the overdose survivors. But in those runs, we get information or intelligence of maybe a homeless camp or somebody hurting or somebody that we've been sort of trying to talk to for a while now. And so it gives us the opportunity to go and engage them and continue to pursue them. And I think the most effective, or I would say the most successful stories or situations I see are with people who have relationships of people who are doing this. It's really, even in my faith life, which is my whole life, but, another position as a chaplain, as a pastor, I found that it's about community and relationship, that's our really the number one, love, I always say, is the greatest weapon we possess, but it is the number one weapon we have against anything like this, because what addiction does is it alienates people, it separates people, and people become discouraged and lost and hopeless. And so if they start to build healthy relationships and they start to build some trust, and not just in others but also people trusting them, then there starts to become some purpose and connection, and that's when people seem to have more success. So,
you enjoy this work.
I love what I do.
Yeah. And that's I think it shows in how you do it and how you reach out. You've been a year at Paaca. You've had extensive experience with other programs as well. And as you say, you're a man of faith with, is it the South Coast Community Church?
That's correct.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. What has kept you going? I know you like it, but again, it can be discouraging.
Short answer, God. I would say that there's an old saying that, rescued people rescue people. And I was rescued, So I think what keeps me going is gratitude, knowing that I could be that person on the street had nobody persisted with me or loved me back to life. And so the way I see it is that I might be that person that connects with that next one and saves that life, and not because of what I possess in a sense in and of myself, but what I possess as far as this hope that I have that others need. And addiction, it starts off, seems harmless enough with most people, and we think we have a control or a grip on it before it gets a grip on us. And I think what keeps people in it, the majority, is hopelessness. It's easy to lose hope very quickly when you start to realize something greater than you has got a hold on you. What
made you follow a path to a better life? What convinced you that this is the time?
Well, I kind of mentioned earlier to you that I don't believe in I don't have this set belief in what rock bottom is. That statement, I think, is something gets thrown around too loosely. I think that it's perspective, and I think that it just gets to a point where someone gets really tired, or they get to a point where they're really willing to make a change, and opportunity meets willingness and so on. In my case, as I told you, I went through multiple facilities and, counselors, medications, AANA, tried all the various sort of opportunities that were available to me, or resources that were available to me. And then I was not really a man of faith. I had a belief. I was mostly atheist as a younger person. Then I kind of went to an agnostic state where I just believed that there was a God, but he couldn't be known fully by us. And then I got to a place where, out of desperation and, not wanting to live anymore, at one point I cried out and kind of threw out my fleece and said, well, if you're real, you'll do something. And almost as if I had the right to challenge the creator of the universe. But in my head, I was at the end anyways. 2 weeks later to the day, on my 36th birthday, I had my mom, my brother, my two best friends, they sat me down and they confronted me out of fear of me dying. And it was different from the past confrontations. It was a lot more compassionate, a lot less demanding, a lot less reprimanding. It was more of like a plea. And I think they had realized that I was at my end as far as I was hopeless. I had split from my wife at the time and kids, and was living in and out of my car and couch surfing and things like that, staying at my mom's when I could put it together enough to be there in her presence and not embarrassed. And so at that moment, I don't have the time to go into the details, but I'll tell you this, that at that moment, it was so blatantly obvious to me that this was orchestrated by someone or something greater than just my family and friends. And the coincidences were too coincidental. And so I finally agreed to go into a program called Teen Challenge, which was the toughest of its kind. It had a reputation. It's a 15-month program to commence, 21 months to graduate. My friend and co-pastor, Brian Doobie, had graduated and was now a pastor. He was one of the best friends that I said had confronted me. And I had seen such a radical transformation in his life and freedom that I had never experienced. And he was heavily addicted as well. So I kind of wanted what he had, and the timing of everything, and the fact that, I cried out to God and a man of God came to me, and then they would put me in a faith-based program, and amongst again, plethora of other coincidences, I had to at least give it a shot.
Sure.
And so I submitted myself to the process, as they say.
And you're in recovery. You are sober.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Oh yeah. I mean, I look at it as recovery is the steps of getting away from drugs and alcohol and regaining your life. I went to Teen Challenge. I spent almost a year there. And I'll tell you, I was only committing to 30 days, and it ended up, transforming me so radically that I left there a different person than I was when I walked in those doors. Mm-hmm. Somebody I didn't even know that I could be. And it was amazing because I express it as hopeful and free. But there's so much more to it, I never in a million years expected that I would ever get beyond the drugs and alcohol, never mind be a productive member of society or even be useful to people at any point. I was always the thorn in somebody's side. I was always the burden, or I was always that person that people will roll their eyes or say, oh no, he's here, hide your pocketbook or whatever, whatever the reason was. But I remember, coming home and all of a sudden things changed radically quickly, and I started giving back what I had to people and started finding my purpose there. And,
Jamie, I want to remind our listeners, you're listening to Townsquare Sunday. I'm Jim Phillips, and my guest is Jamie Casey. He is the operations manager at Paaca in New Bedford. He is so much more, though, when you listen to this amazing story about his own recovery and the work that he does. How many people do you work with in a week?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I bet you never stop working.
No, I don't.
Really?
And my wife wants to kill me half the time because of it. But they say you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? I love what I do.
All right.
Yeah.
And what do you say to these folks to get them to give up that life in favor of a new life?
I invite them into my life, or into our life, our team's life. I like I said, it's a sense of belonging and relationship that is really what seems to be the most effective tool. I mean, there's a bunch of tools in our tool belts, and don't get me wrong, there are recovery and treatment places and medically assisted treatment and counseling and medications and all those things. And I don't discount any of them, but in and of themselves, they are not the most effective tools. Nothing trumps community and relationship when it comes to recovery and freedom and purpose. So what we do is we really try to make friends, and we really try to invite people in. And sobriety is not a prerequisite. It is not a stipulation, if you will. What we're trying to get to is to the core of the person and look at the whole person. Why does somebody get to that point, and how did they get do they get to that point? And why are they self-medicating, or why do they continue despite this horrible situation that they're in, and it's keeping them buried there? And so we get to the sort of the crux of the matter, I guess, and we want to go deep with them. We want to find out who they are at their core and what makes them tick, and then we find a method that works for each person. There is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to recovery. As I told you, I tried many different things that did work for some people, and that's excellent. But for me, it was much more. It was deeper. It was a faith. It was a relationship with God that I had never had. It was a spiritual awakening. There are some people who, in their recovery, remain atheist, and we work with them too. And I wait for my moments to proselytize, of course, but sure. I don't jam anything down anybody's throat because relationship's important. So, my thing is that, if somebody responds well to homeopathy and a recovery coach and massage and yoga, then that's what's going to work for them. And we're going to hook them up with the right people. And we have a community that we've created at Paaca that does address those things and does provide those resources.
What's the greatest need in the community to address this problem? I mean, you say you've got things in your toolbox. Mm-hmm. I've always heard you need more treatment beds.
I think that's a debatable topic, and it depends who you ask. I think treatment beds are definitely in demand. There's no question about it that there's a shortage of those. We also are having issues with insurances, even allowing for the allotted time or necessary time for treatment. there's also aftercare, that there's a huge lacking of effective and good aftercare programs, or even houses, transitional homes and things like that. And there are some good ones out there, but they're always full. And, I think what's lacking is just I think what prevents us from getting to the next level in this is that we still sort of isolate addiction or stigmatize people who are caught up in addiction as different or untreatable or unrelatable, when really they're only looking for relationship. And you had mentioned that people who have been in this or who are in recovery are usually going to be much more effective or better at this, but that doesn't mean that those are the only people who can have compassion. The reason we're probably more effective is because, again, we've been there, we understand, but the compassion is a big key in all of this, that where people would start embracing or understanding a little bit better, I think that we would be much more apt. I mean, we could go down the list. We could talk about prescriptions. We could talk about availability. We could talk about some of the harm reduction techniques that aren't being used in the city around us. Those are all things that would be a big help.
Jamie Casey, great to meet you. Really, you're doing some very important work in the city of New Bedford with Paaca and other groups, of course, and we wish you well.
Thank you.
It is a hard job, but it is a job I think you're pretty well equipped to deal with, so good luck.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you, too.
And that is this week's Townsquare Sunday program. Thank you for tuning in. A tip of the hat to our production director, Jason Kent, digital editor, Casey Sylvia, for their help in getting this program on the air and on our website. I'm Jim Phillips. Have a great week and a wonderful Sunday.